What's good, everyone, and welcome back to Kaya's Commentary. And if you're new here, welcome to Kaya's Commentary. This is a podcast that offers commentary on pop culture topics, real world issues, and anything in between. This is episode 10 of my 13-part series, Picture This, where I look at Black, Indigenous people of color representation in the media of the past and how that affects their presence in the science fiction and fantasy genres of today. So, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about Gen V with the characters of Marie and Andre and Jordan, as well as the show slightly as a whole. Today, we're talking about Netflix's Sandman. Admittedly, this episode may be the shorter of the bunch because I so the Sandman is based off a couple of comics and doing research for trying to find reviews of the show, which I've been told is, it was pretty close to the comics, but people are still going to have different opinions of the comics versus the show. So I'll find a reaction and then be like, oh, wait, no, you're talking about the comic, what about the show? So, this show doesn't even really follow Morpheus, the Lord of Dreams. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. It sets up several other characters while not being an ensemble show, while also being an ensemble show. And other gods like Desire and Dream, he's Dream, Desire and Destiny and Delirium, um, and Despair, and their respective duties, right? So again, this is gonna be like probably the shortest episode. Um, let's get into it. So I have a couple of comments we're gonna read from several different places, and they'll really be kind of like an overview of the show. The character of Daniel Dream once Morpheus decides to cease, and death. I couldn't honestly really find many viewings of Dream or their parents. What I can do is, try to give my own interpretation of it, um, and a form of reaction from the creators. So we have a couple of different places to read. Um, Sandman says, I see many people say that Dream could not change, so he chose to die instead. However, isn't the whole story of Daniel basically Dream, the entity, changing and evolving? Daniel is much kinder and nicer than Dream from what I saw. It feels to me more like a metaphorical growth evolution. It's a happy ending dressed as a tragic one. Dream changed to be kinder by letting his old self die like a caterpillar entering a cocoon and turning into a butterfly. You don't say the caterpillar couldn't fly, so it died and got replaced, right? So, of that comment, I guess I should give a bit more backstory of that comment. So, we get to a point in the episode in the series where Morpheus, a child is created in his realm, in the dream realm. So, technically, the child belongs to him, even if his mother doesn't want the child to belong to him, but instead to her. So, it is like his legacy to grow up and become the next dream, right? Whenever Morpheus decides to step away, um, he'll have all of Morpheus's memories and ideals. He'll be, Dream. It's just that Morpheus is gone. So by this point, Morpheus is gone, and it's a sad farewell for many people. I assume it's comically accurate, but it's a sad farewell for many people. Um, and there was also, of course, a bit of backlash about Jacob Anderson being cast. I believe that's a race swap. So this particular comment provides a level of depth to Morpheus stepping away and Daniel entering it. So I'm going to put it in critically positive, um, especially with the butterfly metaphor, as Daniel will have all of, Morpheus's, you know, memories. Morpheus didn't die. He moved on, right? So with that said, Mysteries Fun 1630 adds on, You're totally right. I think the problem is that many people think change or die has been presented as an alternative when it's always been both. The actual quote is, "The Lord of Dreams learns that one must change or die and makes his decision. It is never implied that he chooses one or the other because he does both. He changes before he dies, yes, but mostly Dream changes through letting a viewpoint, Morpheus, die and becomes a new Dream, Daniel. Dream cannot die, only his aspects can, and that implies change. Just like we sometimes have to let viewpoints die if we truly want to move and grow. Morpheus might have believed he could not change enough, but that doesn't mean that he didn't change. I think it's a bit of a media literacy thing. Some people seemingly cannot hold space for both the idea of two things being true at once. Again, this notion of now we have to add the thing about media literacy that's really tough these days, but this notion of Morpheus morphing into a better, and I don't really want to use the word better, but an evolved version of himself. And that evolved version being a Black British person, a person of color, says something. The meaning changes now. So we're gonna put that in critically positive in Daniel's favor. Let's see. We have another comment that says, Ravenwing 263 says, "It's bittersweet. Daniel will be a better dream than Morpheus was going forward, and the universe will be better for it. That's good, but in order to become the kind of dream that created Daniel, Morpheus has already evolved into a better version of himself. It just wasn't enough, and that's tragic. Death will still miss Morpheus when she's putting the chairs up at the end of the universe." This whole notion, and I'm not gonna say like, Netflix made this metaphorical. I'm sure the comics were metaphorical, but Netflix adding all these Black people, people of color to this show, and then it being metaphorical, really goes into that step of adding people of color, Black people in these spaces, and then taking it a step further and giving them like that humanity, right? Something to do. They're not just there, they're there and they represent these things that are so metaphorically beautiful. Death is, not the end, and dream will be a better, Daniel will be a better dream. Than Morpheus because he's more evolved, he's softer, he's kinder. That means something. That begins to change the meaning of it. Sparky Frog adds on, Morpheus as a personality is gone, only most of his memories remain. I think he did a lot of changing during the years, but he still had to face the consequences of his actions. In the case of his son, had he stayed the same stuck-up butthole he was before his imprisonment, maybe he wouldn't have ended his son's suffering and would have been safe from the Furies. Ironic. So again, this white character acknowledging his errors. I won't say that he's the monster, but acknowledging his errors, and his issues and growing, and that evolution looks like a kinder, softer person who happens to be Black. It changes the meaning. Um, I believe we have a couple of comments to Dream now, and I'm sorry, to Death now. So I will get into Death. In the comics, she's vastly different from her show counterpart. So Kamatha Alderdings says, "I wasn't worried until I saw the pre-release clip of her with the violinist, and I thought, she doesn't quite have the bubbly vibe that I associated with Death. But expectation is the theft of joy, and I always try to judge adaptations as being their own things, so I didn't let it color my viewing. Then we get the first dialogue between them and the sound of her wings, and they cut out almost all of the Mary Poppins stuff, and I realized that I couldn't picture how Baptiste's death sang fabulicious or supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And I won't lie, I was disappointed. But again, I was determined to assess this show on its own merits rather than comparing it to something from 30 years ago that partly exists in my own imagination. And then there was the Apple bit, and that was so death, less bubbly than the death of the comics, done with more sincerity and seriousness than the death of the comics might have done it, but absolutely unmistakably 100% death. Death. And from that point on, I've had zero doubts about this version of the character. Not quite the same as the character in the comics, more restrained, less overtly joyful, but definitely still the same character where it counts. We are going to put that in a critically positive. They acknowledged the doubts that they had. They acknowledged what, their own, I won't say biases, but their own views that they were holding on to. They watched despite those views and they were changed. Their opinion changed. I will admit that Death is probably my favorite character in the show for her portrayal. I heard that she's Death is often portrayed when it's a woman as like manic pixie girl or this emo goth girl. She's, a bit of both, but also not. And so there is a level of depth that is added to depth. And I think especially when you make her a black person to keep her from being this gloomy person. And I don't know how I would feel about her being so gloomy because that plays back into that, she's a gloomy emotionalist, so I'm not going to have any emotion or humanity for her. So I like her portrayal, and I will put this in a critically positive um, category. I believe I have one or two others. Abigail Who says, well, the Sandman chose a good place to end. Though, disclaimer, I haven't read this particular comment, so for this episode, my thoughts are show only. Deph's conversation with herself at the end felt like it was aimed at us who've been with the show so long. That's all we get, yes, but the fact that it doesn't last forever makes it something we treasure even more. Maybe the ideal was 3 to 5 seasons of this, getting more animated side stories, getting the storylines we were hoping for, but we got a live action adaptation in any case, which was more than what people hoped for years ago, more than the attempts to adopt the story that all wound up canned in the end. And Kirby is just so good as Death. This might just be a me thing, but I liked her being more serene in the show. And maybe because I got into the comics in my 30s, and maybe because I prefer a take on Death that's a little less manic pixie girl and more the gentle friend who will sit with you and listen. Her expressions, her love for what life can offer, and how eager she is, it's all so much fun to watch. We'll put that also in critically positive. Again, the main thing for this show is like its metaphoricalness, and so to have black characters, people of color characters, in these roles that just so happen, Death is this character that is gentle and that's going to sit with you. She's a dark-skinned woman too, and she's gentle and she's gonna sit with you and help you transition. She's not, a reaper with a Seath, right? Like she walks you over to it. She's very gentle. She's very calm. It changes the meaning. It has a different meaning. Um, as far as like creatives go, the creator of the comics, I believe, is in trouble now. So I'm actually not quite certain how much involvement he had in the show, but the way that, they changed the race of the character, but didn't feel the need to add in anything else, because this is obviously a clear difference from her comic book character counterpart, but didn't feel the need to add anything else unintentionally, like she is a bit more assertive in her role. It says something. I think one of our last quotes will be Akita Suki Shimera, who says, "Wow, I did not expect to tear up for this. This one episode on death, both the character and the theme, almost tops the entire season 2 for me, other than maybe all of the eulogies in episode 11. Death is such a refining character, and I love the fact that despite her function, she constantly contemplates what it means to be alive, maybe especially because of her duties. Also, I did not expect to resonate with Sexton this way. Though I never thought to and will never want to end my own life, the question he raises is one I think about all the time. How do we live our lives knowing there is so much suffering happening in the world and knowing there is very little we can do about that? I think Death's response, free will, is a great reminder that though we may not be able to choose how we die, we can choose how we live and how to use our limited time. We must accept that not all plans will go as we wish, and we mustn't forget to enjoy the unexpected moments. What a beautiful and heartfelt message to end this series on. I agree. Critically positive. And I know that most of these have been placed in critically positive. Um, there are negative comments. There are racist comments. I've seen people reply to that. I've seen people allude to that. But again, anything that was even critically negative was more so to the comics and not really to the show. So I opted not to use them. As far as like, racist comments, people get upset about race swapping, especially for Black characters, and I've seen people allude to those comments. I've seen people say that, they didn't read anybody upset with this didn't really read the comics because their race swapping doesn't really change anything. So I don't understand why you're mad at it. It didn't change much. Um, but for the most part, this show, which was a little chaotic, and I've also seen comments that say, it was a little hard to keep up. Admittedly, it was a little hard to keep up, especially not having read the comics, unlike Gen V, where I watched it and didn't have to watch The Boys to get it, or unlike The Walking Dead, where I didn't have to read the comics to get it. You might want to read the comics, but I also am really attached to the character of Death. Again, I cannot overstate characters like um Death. I want to call her Dream so bad. Death and Daniel, being in these characters that are softer, that are compassionate and overtly so. Maybe a little wise and maybe a little play into that. I don't want to say magical Negro, but a little bit of that Black Yodaism. But not enough that it's a problem. It makes sense why she's so wise. It makes sense why Daniel is, maybe he's not so wise just yet, but why he's a little bit softer, So they changed the meaning. We also have characters like Rose that I didn't go into. Now, Rose kind of was a hard character to watch. She was trying to find her brother. Um and she finds him, but also she's like squaring off with Morpheus over Hippolyta's baby. And it's like that back and forth. I understand where she's coming from, but there are points where it is hard to watch. And that shows that, you can have a Black character because Rose is Black. That shows that you can have a Black character. I won't call her stupid. I'm not, but. uh, I don't even want to call her annoying. I can't think of the word right now. Um, we'll say aggravating. They're so stuck in their ways. And, that could be a stereotype all of its own if if it's like, prejudice or whatever. It didn't make sense to go up against Morpheus, but also, she's trying to protect her friend's baby, and that also kind of plays into that, um, caretaker stereotype, but that they didn't play it that way. Um, but these characters being people of color now, it all changes the meaning. And for such a metaphorical show, it's looking like for the better, honestly. If I haven't said already, we're gonna put that in critically positive. And like I said, this is really gonna be the shorter of the episodes because I couldn't find much on the show itself, which is so strange. But that's it. That's all. Thanks for listening and watching. Let me know your comments, your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you find anything interesting? What are your thoughts about this show? Be respectful. We can have a conversation with one another, but only if we are respectful. With that, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and stick around for the next episode where we get into Disney's The Acolyte.